Hey everyone! Today I'm going to tell you a history from ancient times about Alexander the Great and his big challenge at the city of Tyre in 332 BCE. This wasn't just a simple battle. It was a long, difficult fight between a super smart general and a city that thought it couldn't be beaten. After beating the Persian king Darius III in a big battle, Alexander took his army of about 35,000 to 40,000 soldiers and marched into a place called Phoenicia. Some cities like Byblus and Sidon gave up without a fight. But Tyre? Tyre was different. Their leaders met with Alexander and acted friendly. But when he asked to come into the city to make an offering to a god named Heracles, things changed. In Tyre, they called this god Melkart, but it was basically the same idea. Still, the people of Tyre weren't fooled. They knew Alexander was really trying to get inside their city. So they said no. They told him he could do the sacrifice in Old Tyre, which was on the mainland. But everyone knew that place didn't matter. It wasn't protected and had no military value. The real city of Tyre was on an island, half a mile off the coast, with huge stone walls and a powerful navy. They weren't about to let him in. Alexander saw this as a challenge. To him, their refusal was like a declaration of war. But the people of Tyre weren't scared. Their city had survived many attacks before, and they were ready. They even sent most of their women and children to a nearby friendly city called Carthage to keep them safe. Carthage also promised to send help. Alexander didn't just get angry, he had a plan. He met with his top commanders and explained why he needed to take Tyre. It wasn't just to prove a point. Tyre was a key base for the Persian navy. If he left it alone, it could mess up his plans to move into Egypt. Even though things were tense, he gave diplomacy one last try. He sent messengers asking Tyre to surrender. But instead of replying, the people of Tyre killed the messengers and threw their bodies into the sea. That was it. No more talking. At the start of 332 BCE, Alexander began the siege. He took over Old Tyre and started building a huge causeway, a land bridge made from rocks and wood to reach the island. At first, it was easy because the water was shallow. But as they built further out, it got harder. The sea became deeper, and the people of Tyre started attacking. To defend his workers, Alexander built 2 tall towers and covered them in animal skins to protect them from fire. He placed big weapons on top and stood out there almost every day, helping his men and giving out small rewards to keep them motivated. Still, Tyre wasn't going to give up easily. The people of Tyre came up with a smart counterattack. They took an old boat used for carrying horses and filled it with flammable stuff like dry straw, pitch, and sulfur. They even hung pots of burning oil from the mast. They made the back of the boat heavy so the front would rise up, and 2 smaller ships dragged it toward the causeway. When it hit, the whole thing exploded into flames. Alexander's towers caught fire, and Tyrian soldiers rowed out in small boats to fight his men while they tried to stop the blaze. The siege weapons were destroyed, and the wooden defenses on the causeway were gone. And Alexander realized he couldn't win the battle just by attacking from land. So, he decided to build up a strong navy. He left the construction project behind and went to the city of Sidon. There, he gathered ships from many nearby places like Byblus, Aradus, Rhodes, Lycia, Cilicia, and even his home in Macedon. The king of Cyprus also sent 120 ships to help. Soon, Alexander had a huge fleet of about 220 ships. While waiting for all the ships and soldiers to arrive, he spent 10 days fighting small battles in Arabia. Then he returned to Sidon and welcomed Cleander, who had brought 4,000 new soldiers from Greece. Once everything was ready, Alexander led his fleet toward Tyre. His ship was in front, leading the way. When they got close to the city, the fleet stopped in formation so the people in Tyre could see just how large it was. The Tyrians were shocked. They had no idea Alexander had built such a massive navy, and help from Carthage never came. Knowing they couldn't win in a sea battle, the Tyrians blocked both their harbors. They used heavy chains and lined up warships to guard the entrances. Alexander tested their defenses by attacking the Sidon harbor and sinking 3 enemy ships. But instead of going all in, he set up a smart plan. His allies from Cyprus kept watch on the northern harbor, while his other ships helped protect the construction site. He placed siege engines like catapults and ballistas on the mole and some ships, launching attacks on the city walls. The Tyrians fought back by rolling huge boulders into the sea to block his ships. Alexander's men tied ropes around the rocks and tried to pull them away with cranes, but Tyrian divers swam underwater and cut the ropes. So Alexander replaced the ropes with metal chains. The defenders then tried to stop the ships by throwing boiling sand and melted metal over the walls, which burned through armor and caused serious injuries. One day, the Tyrians launched a surprise attack. 13 of their warships snuck out of the northern harbor and attacked the Cyprian ships, sinking 2 of them. As soon as Alexander heard the news, he jumped onto one of his warships and led 5 more into battle. He caught the Tyrians as they tried to flee, damaged some ships, and captured 2. Most of the Tyrians swam back to the safety of their city. Now it was time for the final attack. Alexander's forces used battering rams to break down the walls. At first, the attacks failed, but after 3 days, he came up with a new plan. While his men pretended to attack in one spot, 2 ships carrying his best soldiers went toward a small break in the southern wall. Alexander led them himself. One of his commanders, Admetus, was the first to climb up and was killed by a spear, but the rest of the soldiers pushed forward. They got into the city and started fighting through the streets. It was a brutal end. 6,000 Tyrians were killed, 2,000 were hung on crosses near the shore, and 30,000 were sold as slaves. Only the king, his family, and a few people hiding in a temple were spared. Alexander lost around 400 men. Finally, in July 332 BCE, the siege was over. Alexander gave thanks to the god Heracles, held a race with torches, and marched through the city in victory. Now that Tyre had fallen, he was ready to move on to conquer Gaza and Egypt.